Hey guys, so I got cut off a little bit yesterday. The phone rang, and as soon as it rings, it stops the recording. So I'm going to start from where we were at the bottom. And remember, they were just kind of hanging out over that creek, and they were going across on the rope swing, just the two of them. "We need a place," she said, "just for us. It would be so secret that we would never tell anyone in the whole world about it." Jess came swinging back and dragged his feet to stop. She lowered her voice almost to a whisper. "It might be a whole secret country," she continued, "and you and I would be the rulers of it." Her words stirred inside of him. He'd like to be a ruler of something, even something that wasn't real. "Okay," he said. "Where could we have it?" "Over there, in the woods, where nobody would come and mess it up." There were parts of the woods that Jess did not like, dark places where it was almost like being underwater, but he didn't dare say. "I know," she was getting excited. "It could be a magic country like Narnia, and the only way you can get in is by swinging across on this enchanted rope." Her eyes were bright. She grabbed the rope. "Come on," she said. "Let's find a place to build our castle stronghold." They had gone only a few yards into the woods beyond the creek bed when Leslie stopped. "How about right here?" she asked. "Sure," Jess agreed quickly, relieved that there was no need to plunge deeper into the woods. He would take her there, of course, for he wasn't such a coward that he would mind a little exploring now and then farther in amongst the ever-darkening columns of the tall pines. But as a regular thing, as a permanent place, this was where he would choose to be. Here, where the dogwood and redwood played hide and seek between the oaks and evergreens, and the sun flung itself in golden streams through the trees to splash warmly at their feet. "Sure," he repeated himself, nodding vigorously. The underbrush was dry and would be easy to clear away. The ground was almost level. "This will be a good place to build." Leslie named their secret land Terabithia, and she loaned Jess all of her books about Narnia so he could know how things went in a magic kingdom, how the animals and the trees must be protected, and how a ruler must behave. That was the hard part. When Leslie spoke, the words rolling out so regally, you knew she was a proper queen. He could hardly manage English, much less the poetic language of a king. But he could make stuff. They dragged boards and other materials down from the scrap heap by Miss Bessie's pasture and built their castle stronghold in the place they had found in the woods. Leslie filled a 3-pound coffee can with crackers and dried fruit and a 1-pound can with strings and nails. They found 5 old Pepsi bottles, which they washed and filled with water. "In case," Leslie said, "of a siege." Like God in the Bible, they looked at what they had made and found it very good. "You should draw a picture of Terabithia for us to hang in the castle," Leslie said. "I can't." How could he explain in a way Leslie would understand? How he yearned to reach out and capture the quivering life about him, and how when he tried, it slipped past his fingertips, leaving a dry fossil upon the page. "I just can't get the poetry of the trees," he said. She nodded. "Don't worry," she said. "You will someday." He believed her because there, in the shadowy light of the stronghold, everything seemed possible. Between the two of them, they owned the world, and no enemy. Gary Fulcher, Wanda K. Moore, Janice Avery, Jess's own fears and insufficiencies, nor any of the foes whom Leslie imagined attacking Terabithia could ever really defeat them. And now, before I read a little bit, we are already now learning a little bit about Jess. He's kind of a scaredy cat a little bit. Her whole hobby of being able to scuba dive like scares him to death because it makes him think of water. And so that would make me believe that maybe doesn't know how to swim. And he's afraid of going deep into the forest, and he's just afraid to do things. And Leslie is this like adventurous, crazy girl who is like, everything she says comes out like a perfect song, and she's just making him like come out a little bit, making him try some different things. A few days after they finished the castle, Janice Avery fell down in the school bus and yelled that Jess had tripped her as she went past. She made such a fuss that Mrs. Prentice, the driver, ordered Jess off the bus, and he had to walk the 3 miles home. When Jess finally got to Terabithia, Leslie was huddled next to one of the cracks between the roof, trying to get enough light to read. There was a picture on the cover which showed a killer whale attacking a dolphin. "What you doing?" He came in and sat beside her on the ground. "Reading. I had to do something. That girl!" Her anger came rocketing to the surface. "It don't matter. I don't mind walking all that much." What was a little hike compared to what Janice Avery might have chosen to do? "It's the principle of the thing, Jess. That's what you've got to understand. You have to stop people like that. Otherwise, they turn into tyrants and dictators." He reached over and took the whale book from her hand, pretending to study the bloody picture on the jacket. "Getting any good ideas?" "What?" "I thought you was getting some good ideas on how to stop Janice Avery." "No, stupid. We're trying to save the whales. They might become extinct." He gave her back the book. You save the whales and shoot the people? Huh? She grinned finally. "Something like that, I guess. Say, did you ever hear the story about Moby Dick?" "Who's that?" "Well, there was once this huge white whale named Moby Dick," and Leslie began to spin out a wonderful story about a whale and a crazy sea captain who was bent on killing it. His fingers itched to try to draw it on paper. Maybe if he had some proper paints, he could do it. There ought to be a way of making the whale shimmering white against the dark water. And here's a picture of them reading. At first, they avoided each other during school hours, but by October, they grew careless about their friendship. Gary Fulcher, like Brenda, took great pleasure in teasing Jess about his girlfriend. It hardly bothered Jess. He knew that a girlfriend was somebody who chased you on the playground and tried to grab you and kiss you. He could no more imagine Leslie chasing a boy than he could imagine Mrs. Double-Chinned Myers shimmying up a flagpole. Gary Fulcher could go to you-know-where and warm up his toes. Whoa. There was really no free time at school except recess. And now that there was no races, Jess and Leslie usually looked for a quiet place on the field and sat and talked. Except for the magic half hour on Fridays, recess was all that Jess looked forward to at school. Leslie could always come up with something funny that made the long days bearable. Often the joke was on Mrs. Myers. Leslie was one of those people who sat quietly at her desk, never whispering or daydreaming or chewing gum, doing beautiful schoolwork, and yet her brain was so full of mischief that if the teacher could have once seen through that mask of perfection, she would have thrown her out in horror. Jess could hardly keep a straight face in class, just trying to imagine what might be going on behind that angelic little look of Leslie's. One whole morning, as Leslie had related it at recess, she had spent imagining Mrs. Myers on one of those fat farms down in Arizona. In her fantasy, Mrs. Myers was one of the foodaholics who would hide bits of candy bars in odd places, up the hot water faucet, only to be found out and publicly humiliated before all the other fat ladies. That afternoon, Jess kept having visions of Mrs. Myers dressed only in a pink corset being weighed in. "You've been cheating again, Gussie," the tall, skinny directress would say. Mrs. Myers was on the verge of tears. "Jess Aarons!" The teacher's sharp voice punctured his daydream. He couldn't look Mrs. Myers straight in her pudgy face. He'd crack up. He set his sight on her uneven hemline. "Yes'm?" He was going to have to get coaching from Leslie. Mrs. Myers always caught him when his mind was on vacation, but she never seemed to suspect Leslie of not paying attention. He sneaked a glance up that way. Leslie was totally absorbed in her geography book, or so it would appear to anyone who didn't know. Okay, and there's quite a bit before the end of this chapter, and I'm already at 9 minutes, and it's really hard to upload more than that. So we will keep reading, but it's kind of fun that they've got this friendship now that's they're not even embarrassed about it anymore. Like, they're not hiding it from people. They don't care what people say. They can call her his girlfriend and vice versa, and he knows better because it's just his good friend. So I hope you're enjoying the book, and I'll read more again tomorrow. Bye, guys.